welcome to the Courage to Rise show. My name is Katie Cianci, and we have a new guest, and we have Troy Love. And Troy Love is the president and clinical director of Yuma Counseling Center. He has about 20 years of experience in mental health and is an author of several books, Finding Peace, A Year of Self-Love, which I love, and been using that, and Daily Wisdom for Loving Yourself, which is a daily wisdom for loving yourself, and then The Art of Peace. Yeah. So welcome. We're so excited that you're here.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So would you like to share any more about yourself to our guests?
I'm really excited to be here with you. I live in Arizona. I've been here for 20 years. It's nice. We just went back home over the holidays and there was a lot of snow, and it reminded me why I live in Arizona. So I'm really excited to be here.
That's great. Wonderful. Well, I want to share a little bit because I have been reading your Year of Self-Love, and I absolutely love it.
Oh, thank you.
So, and a friend of mine referred it to me. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about self-love and attachment wounding. So, how those are related, because I know we're both licensed clinical social workers. So we have So, we have that knowledge,
right.
And we have something in common. And so part of, what we learn in our education is about attachment wounding and how that can affect how our relationship with ourselves as well as our relationship with others. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, some people don't even know what attachment wounding is. And so I think that's important to know first, what is attachment wounding?
Yeah, sure. So when I was a teenager, one of the reasons I think I became a social worker is because I was like my friends' counselors. At lunchtime, after school, I was always listening to everyone else's issues, and I liked that. I thought I was a pretty loving, compassionate guy, but I had a lot of shame. I did not like me at all. So it was almost like I was helping other people and I felt good about that. But in the inside, I felt really unworthy of love. I grew up in a home where there was a lot of domestic violence and some other issues that happened. So I went off, I went off to school, and I remember being in the bathroom, having this argument with myself. And the quote is that unless you love yourself, you can't love anybody else. And I thought, that's not true. Like that can't be true. And I'm looking in the mirror and I'm having this conversation with myself, like, that's not true. That's not true. And I love everybody. I think I'm a very loving person. And even though I don't love myself, I can still love other people. And then it was almost like, I don't know what you would call it, but I had like this inspiration or this thought that showed up in my mind that said, well, it's true that you can love other people, but if you don't love yourself, you can't let their love in. Mm-hmm. You can't let it in. You're going to push it away. You're going to reject it. And over time, if you keep rejecting the love that other people are trying to give you, you're going to be empty. And when you're empty, there's no more capacity to be able to love and care for other people. And so when I look at self-love, and a lot of times people think about self-love being selfish, but it isn't selfish. If my love and belonging tank is full, I have a far greater capacity to be able to share that love and compassion to other people. But if my love and belonging tank is empty and I'm just beating myself up, then I don't have that capacity to be able to love other people, and that becomes quite the challenge. Mm-hmm. Over time, as I've been working as a therapist, I've been able to identify what I call our attachment wounds. And these wounds, if we don't do wound care, which is another form of self-care, if we don't do wound care for these wounds, they can create negative core beliefs about ourselves. Let's say that we are there's something wrong with me, that I'm flawed, defective, my world isn't safe. And when I do that, I'm going to put up those walls, kind of like I did when I was a teenager. I had those walls up where I won't let anybody in, and I can't have the kind of attachment and connection that we need to have in order to thrive and do well in the world. And so I learned that it's helpful to identify what those attachment wounds are, and then we can do some wound care. So I'll tell you that what the attachment wounds are, and then we can go from there if that's okay.
Yeah.
So the first one is loss. And loss, it's kind of self-explanatory. It's when you've had someone in your life who's maybe passed away, you were close to them, or your best friend moved across the country, or you moved across the country, or you lost a job, or you're experiencing some kind of financial loss or something like that, where it's not that anybody did anything to you. It's part of the world that we live in, but it can still be very, very painful, and it can be scary. So the first wound is loss. The second one is neglect.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in a situation where you have people that are supposed to love you, but they're so busy doing other things, they can't pay attention to you. I mean, there's definitely the Child Protective Services version of neglect, or with the 2-year-old
Right.
wandering around in the middle of the street at 2 neglect. But for a lot of us, neglect looks like this, and I'm on my phone and I'm not able to connect with you. And if I have a neglect wound, really what I begin to believe is that I'm not worth your attention. I'm not worth your time. And then if I continue to believe that, I'm going to pull away. The next wound is rejection. And rejection is when people specifically tell you that they don't like you, that there's something wrong with you. They make fun of you, they bully you, they put you down, you're not picked for certain things. And that can be a wound that can really perpetuate a deep level of shame. The next wound is, I should cheat. I got to cheat. They're on my wall over there. Abandonment.
Yes.
Abandonment. This is when you have a connection with someone and then all of a sudden they just leave. They walk out of your life. I have several clients whose father just left, or their mother left, or a good friend just stopped talking to them, blocked them on social media, whatever. And all of a sudden they were there today and now they're gone tomorrow, and they don't understand why. And there's no closure about that, but I'm left. Is that wound. The next wound is betrayal. If you have a relationship of trust with somebody and then they do something to violate that trust, they cheat on you, they lie to you, they do something that breaks that trust, that's another attachment wound. And then the last one is abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, but it kind of encapsulates some of the others. But it's somebody is intentionally causing pain and suffering to somebody else, usually because of their own wounds, usually because they haven't done their own wound care, and so now they're inflicting pain on someone else. So those are the 6 attachment wounds. And if we don't do wound care, we don't practice self-compassion and try to figure out how we can care for them, it's definitely going to impact the way that we connect and thrive in life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I have, several of my clients, friends, I have also experienced some of those attachment wounds, perhaps all of them.
Yeah.
It depends on who you have in your life. We can't choose who our parents are. I mean,
No.
we don't choose their background and their history. Our friends, we do have a choice with our friends, and oftentimes the people we choose are similar to
Right.
our parents or our family,
Right.
which we find, well, why does this keep happening over and over and over again? And so first of all, what are some ways that people can, because they might hear that, say, well, I have some wounds. How do I treat those wounds? And I've heard some of my friends say, well, I'm just damaged. I'm just broken.
Mm-hmm.
I can't be fixed. And that, people feel there's shame in that, but there's also a hopelessness. There's nothing I can do about it. So what are your thoughts on that?
So part of, I tell people that when you're kid and you're playing on the playground and the game doesn't go the way that you want, the kids will often say redo or do over. And what are they wanting? They're wanting a different outcome. And we do that in our life as well. I think unconsciously, we keep attracting the same people into our life that have maybe created those wounds in the first place, in the hopes that this will be a different outcome. So, I start having a friendship with someone who's very much like my father, and I'm hoping that in the end it will be different than the way that my relationship with my father was, or whoever,
Mm-hmm.
And so we're looking for a different outcome, but what we don't understand is I keep bringing my woundedness into this relationship. It's not about blaming, like, my parents suck or whatever. It's not about blame, because that doesn't heal anything. It's owning that, okay, I do have this wound. I have an attachment wound. This is where it feels. This is where I feel it in my body. This is what these are some of the triggers that smack up against it, and being able to be aware of that. And then the next part of that, though, is almost at the same time as the wound is being created, especially as children, we don't have the mental capacity to be able to understand why the wound is created. And we're very egocentric as children. And so we then begin to believe, well, it must be me. Mm-hmm. It's not because my mom and dad are alcoholics, or, they have their own issues and they really need to do their own work. A child can't really figure that out. So the only explanation the child really can come up with is, well, it must be me. There must be something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I'm not whatever. So every time the wound gets smacked, the negative core belief that they begin to get developed, I use the analogy of it gets tattooed on their heart over and over and over again with fluorescent ink. If you ever go to like Chuck E. Cheese, with a kid, they stamp the kid's hand with that ink that you can't see unless they do the black light kind of thing. That's what's going on with our heart. Like, normally during the day, I'm not feeling like I'm bad. I'm not feeling like I'm flawed. I'm not feeling like I'm horrible or something's wrong with me. But if that wound gets smacked, it's like somebody just turned that black light on, and then all of a sudden there's something wrong with me. I'm just not enough. And so being able to identify, there's a wound and then there's a negative core belief, and they are very much connected to each other. That's the first step in healing the process. And then the second part is then saying, okay, well, let me look at this negative core belief and ask myself, is it actually true? Is it really true? Am I flawed and defective? What evidence do I have that shows that I'm loved and I'm cared for, and that I have things to offer? And beginning that process of challenging that negative core belief and seeing if we can rewrite it into something that's more truthful, more accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because I think one of the things that's really difficult too is that the patterns of behavior also can push people away.
Yes.
If those wounds are really, really deep and painful. And so that creates, I thought, well, my evidence is all these relationships are not working out, right, if we're using that as an example. So it's really getting back to, or what about like creating new opportunities to connect and have a different story, or have a reparative experience, meaning like they repair some of those wounds, because now they can say, well, now I'm starting to have relationships that are healthy once they start to change those beliefs. Is that what you're talking about?
That's how you heal those attachment wounds, is through healthy connection. Yeah. I use the analogy that these wounds are like sunburns. Mm-hmm. So you go to the beach, you forgot to put sunblock on, you got burnt, but then you have to go to work the next day. You can function, you can do your job, you can do all the stuff that you're normally supposed to do, but you just are praying that someone's not going to come up and say, hey, how are you? And like put their arm on your shoulder, because the moment they do, there's a reaction. I am going to pull away, or I'm going to punch you in the face because it hurts so bad. And that is what happens with these wounds too. Like there is a reaction. Every time I'm in a relationship and the person keeps bumping up against my wounds, I'm going to react. I'm either going to get angry and maybe attack, or I'm going to pull away. And in that process, I'm breaking down the ability to connect with someone. So if I'm able to build a relationship of trust with some people and say, look, I got this rejection wound, and I notice that I tend to pull away sometimes and I don't want to. It's hard for me. This is what's going on. And the other person will usually say something like, I have one of those too. Like I can relate to that. And we can start to build a relationship of understanding with each other. That's really healing. I just shared a little bit about me, and you didn't shame me, and you didn't reject me, and you didn't abandon me. And there, I'm like, oh, there's some evidence that maybe it's okay for me to share and connect, and you're not going to hurt me.
Mm-hmm. That's really powerful, because a lot of us try to hide it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we try to hide this wounding. If we have awareness of it, sometimes we don't even know that there is a wounding. We just know things don't seem to be working out. But we try to hide it because we're afraid that the person won't accept us.
Right.
And so that's like a feeling of shame. So you hide, and you know, feeling vulnerable can be very scary for people, because or even a sign of weakness if they've been conditioned that, you know, look, you don't talk about your feelings, you don't talk about any insecurities that you have, you know, everything's supposed to look great on the outside, you know, but in reality, with one of my favorites is Brene Brown,
I love Brene.
Power of Vulnerability. It's like, there's a power in that, because that's how we can create those new connections, those reparative connections, through vulnerability. And so how can people who maybe have thought, well, I don't know if I can share, you know, how can they start to open themselves up to providing, well, I mean, just like starting with those experiences, because it's scary.
Oh, absolutely. So growing up, my grandpa was a fisherman. He loved to go fishing. I absolutely hated fishing. It was so boring to me. I have a little bit of ADHD, and that just was not exciting to me. But he would go fishing, and there were some times where he would spend all day and he would come back with maybe one fish or maybe nothing. And there were other times that he would go and he would come back with a ton. And I thought about his willingness to sit there and just kind of enjoy nature or whatever, waiting for this fish to bite the line, and how that's an analogy of vulnerability. If I'm wanting to catch a fish, I have to put my line in the water, but there's a risk that I'm not going to catch anything, and I could sit there all day and not catch anything and go home and kind of be disappointed. But there's a 100% guarantee that I'm not going to catch anything if I don't put the line in the water. And that's what vulnerability is about. Yes, if I'm willing to put myself out there, there is a risk that I'm going to be rejected or neglected or abandoned. There is a risk that those wounds might be stirred up against me. But there's also a risk of me getting love, attention, appreciation, affection. But there's a 100% guarantee that I'm not going to get any of that if I'm not willing to put the line in the water. How we work on that vulnerability is identifying, okay, I have this negative core belief. I was just talking to a client yesterday and trying to help her understand that it's okay to reach out and tell someone, hey, can we go to lunch? I need to talk. She goes, I'm nearly 40 years old. I've never done that before. I said, okay, let's look at the risk and the fear that's underneath that. What are you afraid is going to happen? She's like, I'm afraid they're going to say no. I'm afraid that maybe I'm not going to be willing to open up all the way. I'm like, these are baby steps. These are baby steps. But just calling and saying, hey, this is what I need is a way to help you take some progress, and a way of self-compassion, saying, I have a need and I'm going to go find a healthy way to get it met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so helpful, especially like starting with someone that you are pretty sure is safe, can sometimes, or a low risk.
Mm-hmm.
About like starting with a low risk and then moving up to the bigger risks. because
Yes.
once we have some wins, then it's like, okay, I can do this. You know, I might have
Right.
some that don't respond and I'll be okay. I'll survive. And sometimes we feel like, especially with wounding, I've had, you know, friends or clients, they have a relationship that ends and it really feels like they're dying. Like
Mm-hmm.
it feels like I'm having a heart attack. I don't think I'm gonna, you know, I'm, you know, heartbroken, you know, if it's been a relationship that ended in a traumatic way, or like you said, abandonment. Some of these
Mm-hmm.
wounds are really all of them when they
Yes.
get, it feels really, really painful. And some people have a hard time getting out of that cycle of shame, because especially if they've had several over and over again.
Yeah.
So, so why is, can you tell us a little bit about shame resiliency and why self-love is critical to shame resiliency?
Yeah. So uh, I often talk about what I call the shadows of shame, and we don't have enough time to go into all of those, but
That's
I'll
okay.
talk about the judge in particular because that tends to be the loudest for most people. It's the voice in your head that sits there and talks to you and is critical and tells you you're not good enough and you're too fat and why are you wearing that and oh my gosh, people are going to die if you do that. And it's just that inner critic voice. Most people can identify with that voice, and there's a couple things that I do with that. First, I help you understand that that judge is not you, and it's actually a powerful, powerful exercise. If you can write down what the judge is saying in second person, as if you were taking dictation from the judge, because it distances you from the judge, and then you're able to say, well, that's not actually true. I see some flaws in your reasoning, and we can deal with that. But inevitably, when I introduce the judge to people, their first thought is, well, how can I get rid of him? How can I get rid of her? I don't want the judge. I want the judge to go away. And I'm like, well, yes, that would be amazing if we didn't have the judge anymore. Unfortunately, that's a defense mechanism. The judge has shown up as a way of perfecting you with the belief that if you were perfect, you're not going to have any more wounds. You're not going to be hurt anymore. So there's a defensive part of that. It's unrealistic. It's unreasonable, but the judge isn't going to go away. I'm sad to say that. What we want to be able to help you do is develop some resilience to that shame, to be able to help you identify, oh, I see you, you're talking to me. I don't believe what it is that you're saying. I know that I'm worthy of love and belonging. I don't have to be perfect. I want to be able to help you develop some resiliency, because then the judge doesn't have as much power. When we first introduced the judge, the judge has so much power, has been pulling the strings in our lives for so much. But when we're able to start identifying, I see you, I don't believe you, I'm shining light on that, all of a sudden I'm starting to feel like, okay, I am not you, and I do matter, and I do have value, and I have gifts and talents and abilities. And when we do that, our resilience blooms, and we're not being pulled by the shame anymore. So that's why we want to develop shame resilience. Brene says, everybody has shame, and the only people don't have shame are sociopaths. And so you can either choose to be a sociopath, or you can choose to admit that you have shame. We all have shame. It's not going away. It's part of our existence, but we can develop some ability to not be dominated by that shame through resilience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so helpful. What would you say are what's like the connection between attachment, wounding, and shame? I mean, is there anything else you want to add to that? Because I think that's important too. Like people don't
Yeah.
understand why they're why they have so much shame.
So we have the wounds, and then we have the negative core beliefs that have been written on our heart. That's kind of the prism by which we view the world, or the paradigm about the way that we view the world is by how we believe about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then shame reinforces that.
Mm-hmm.
Shame continues to reinforce those messages that I'm not enough, I can't do this, all of that. So their whole intention, it's a little weird. They don't do a very good job, but their whole job is, I want to prevent you from feeling pain. I don't want you to hurt anymore. So I'm going to perfect you, or I'm going to tell you that you should just give up, or I'm going to tell you that you deserve better. Those are some of the messages that shame say. If we can understand that, I see that you're trying to help me, but that's actually not the most effective way of helping me. What I actually really need is connection and compassion, and you're not doing that for me. I'm going to go find a healthier way to get that met. And interestingly, if you can identify what the attachment wound is, that also gives you a clue as to what the need is. So if the wound is rejection, if my rejection wound is being stirred up, I need acceptance in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
If it's abandonment that's being stirred up, I need someone to be there and be present. If it's neglect, I need someone to pay attention to me. So if I can identify, oh, this is, and I do this with my guys who are struggling with addiction all the time, like they're like, I'm feeling tempted to go act out. Well, what wound is it that you're experiencing? Oh, I'm feeling neglected. Okay, so it sounds like you need some attention. Where can you go get that in a healthy way instead of going acting out, because that's not going to help? And they think and they ponder and they're like, oh yeah, I could reach out to my dad. I could call a buddy. Great. That will be, you'll get your need met better. And when we do that and the need gets met, shame goes away. They no longer have a job to do. They're coming out because your need isn't getting met, and they're going to try and help you in a very unhealthy way. But once the need is met, shame's gone, and I'm connecting with, I'm okay, I'm worthy. It feels so wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's ironic when the shame shows up, because then you want to isolate. Some people isolate, or they go do something that's harmful for themselves, which creates more shame, and then it just builds and builds and builds, instead of really addressing what is the core wound and what is the need to address that wound. And so then things start to shift and change, and then you no longer need the substance or unhealthy behavior to try to numb that pain.
Absolutely.
So, well, I know we're coming to a close. I loved our conversation, and it's so helpful. And I imagine that people, who are watching are going to absolutely want to connect with you. Of course, by your book, you have the workbook, Finding Peace workbook, which helps address a lot of these, these core wounding that you're talking about. Could you also have some retreats that are coming up, and you have a free gift that you're generously offering. Do you want to share a little more about how they can contact you? And
so you can go to troylove.com, and there you can sign up for the free Finding Peace 5-day challenge. And every day you'll get a very short video, 2 to 4 minutes long, with one little homework assignment to do for each of the 5 days that introduce you to the model, the Finding Peace model that we've been talking about, how we identify the wound and how we work through that shame. It's free. So you could go to troylove.com, sign up for that. Try not to overwhelm you. I know we're all busy. We get bombarded with emails, so that's available for free, and I'd love to be able to offer that. If you're interested in learning more, we do have a Finding Peace retreat that's going to be taking place in Prescott in April. This will be the 4th time that we've done it. It's been an amazing experience every time. The feedback that we get from the clients and the participants that go says that it's life-changing for them. It's a very healing experience for them. So I keep telling myself, I think I'm only going to do it once a year, and then because the feedback is so profound, I end up doing it twice a year. So that's coming up. I also have, like you mentioned, the workbooks that you can buy on Amazon, and I also have a Finding Peace online course. It's an 8-week course that goes into a lot more detail about the stages of healing that are available, and that's all available if you go to troylove.com.
Oh, well, thank you so much for offering this. you know, for offering all of these opportunities for people to heal those attachment wounds and start to really enjoy connection and love and self-compassion. And it's so helpful. I mean, it's necessary. It's necessary that we have these loving, bonding connections with other human beings. I mean, it's essential.
We haven't been put on a planet with 8 billion other people so that we can be isolated and lonely.
Yeah.
We need connection. That's how we heal. That's how we make a difference in this world.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
so much. And so we'll be having another one tomorrow. So thank you so much. We're going to be, I'm telling the people here that are listening. So all of you, we're going to have another video tomorrow. So thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day, and take some time today for some self-compassion and self-love, and try some of the tips that Troy shared with us, because you might be surprised. Once you start practicing on a daily basis, everything will start to shift for yourself and everyone around you. So thank you, and have a great rest of your day. Okay. Hi, welcome to the Courage to Rise show.